Welcome to Outrage Overload, a science podcast about outrage and lowering the temperature. This is episode 64. What if you had to coordinate hundreds of groups, each with different strategies, values, and goals, and somehow keep them all rowing in the same direction to solve one of the toughest challenges of our time? One leader is stepping up to take on that exact task.
Hi, I'm Karissa Raskin. I am the CEO of Listen First Project, and we are an organization that focuses on depolarization and building social cohesion across communities in America.
Karissa Raskin just stepped into the role of CEO at Listen First, a backbone of the bridge building movement. In this conversation, she shares what's working, what's hard, and what gives her hope. If you care about our democracy and how we hold it together in the face of toxic polarization, this is a conversation you won't want to miss. Karissa Raskin, thank you so much for making time for our little program.
Of course. Thanks for having me, David.
You know, and congratulations on the newish role as well.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be able to serve the movement in this capacity.
Well, that's a great lead into kind of what I wanted to start with is sort of your journey that took you to Listen First, and in this type of work, and what kind of personal experiences or maybe professional experiences that shaped your thinking about that.
Sure. Yeah, my road to Listen First is a unique one. I was working in Gainesville prior to this, really working at trying to build connection between large institutions, what some call anchor institutions like universities and hospitals and civic institutions like government and local communities, and really folks in local communities whom have lived experience of some of the challenges that we hear about on the news that we like to talk about a lot, but not all of us have direct experience. Well, there's a lot of us that do, and often their voices aren't heard. So it was my pleasure and my job to figure out a way that large institutions could better listen to the voices of these people on the ground, hear their ideas for solutions to solve wicked problems in their community, and then actually provide them with the support and resources to be able to test out those ideas and make them come to fruition. I did this job both for the University of Florida, and then I transitioned to a role working in local government. And all the while, it was brilliant. I got to build relationships with people whom, honestly, they had no reason to trust me. But through showing up and continuing to show up, through listening and really striving to understand with empathy what they were going through, also recognizing that I could never really know because it wasn't my lived experience, we built rapport and connection. And so I had a very deep allegiance to that type of community building work and the relational wealth that can privilege one's life when you build those friendships based on reciprocity. And so when I was offered this opportunity to apply to help provide direction for the Listen First Coalition, this job description ended up in my email inbox. And it was funny because I read it and it talked about bridge building. I thought, why is my colleague sending me something about bridge building? I do not have a background in architecture. I certainly don't have a background in structural engineering. What on earth are they thinking? And then I read it, and clearly bridge building was about, social relationships and those bridges, not real bridges. And I thought, that's actually a lot of what I do. But then when you read deeper, and I thought more about the political nature of the work and the bridging of divides between left and right, being that I had a more left-leaning perspective on things, I wondered myself if this is a job that would cause me to compromise my own values. Would it put me in a position where I was somehow being coerced or persuaded to no longer think the things I had grown up thinking, or the values that I held would somehow be undercut. And I had a lot of internal trepidation about this, to the point where I actually asked some of my friends who were working with me in the Gainesville community at the time that if I should take this job, if I were to be offered it and take it, please check in with me in 2 months, 4 months, 6 months, and make sure I still sound like Karissa. Make sure that I haven't lost my integrity and my values. And what I can say, David, after being in this work for about 2 years now, it's not that I have a concern about being the person that I was back then. I truly emphatically believe I am a better version of myself because I have become more aware of the biases, the misperceptions, the the misinformation even that I wasn't seeing. And I certainly wasn't aware that I was operating my life under those misunderstandings prior to coming into this job. It has made me a more well-rounded, open-minded, and graceful person when it comes to recognizing differences are there to be appreciated. They are the bedrock of innovation, and it is certainly not something that is worth breaking or missing relationships over.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. I felt like it was felt so much the same way in regard to sort of the personal transformation for me doing the show for the last couple of years.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, am I a different person? Yes. I mean, we're always different, but
Right.
it's those core values and stuff are. I don't have any concern that I've given up some kind of core element of myself, but I've definitely become a different person in terms of how I perceive some of this and how I respond to it.
Yeah.
So this is challenging work, and sometimes it can sort of be inspiring. You get these stories and you see some of these things you see change, but sometimes you don't. Sometimes there can be a frustration. Despite all these efforts, this division seems like as strong as ever, maybe worse. So how do you grapple? I want to know this for me, but also for the listeners. How do you
Yeah.
personally grapple with that sort of tension between sort of hope and the reality of slow progress, and find patience and decide, is patience right, even the right thing? Is that we need to give up on this, or that kind of thing? How do you stay committed?
That is a good question. I think there are so many different levels of this work that sometimes gear shifting and where we're putting our attention and focus is important because burnout is real and a lost sense of hope is real. And that sometimes it's like, reading a paper after you've read it 42 times, you're not going to notice that words are misspelled anymore or things don't make sense. You're just reading it in the way that you expect it to be. So if you take a break and look away at something else and then come back to it, then you start to see where the opportunity for improvement is. And I think a lot of that is the same in this work and probably in a lot of other fields. Um, when you think about the 80,000 pound gorilla that the movement is up against, and I'm talking about mainstream media, the really divisive political scene, your influencers, it can be daunting to think that we are going to even be able to grasp the needle, never mind move it in one direction because it all feels for naught. But that isn't the only thing that it's about. It's also about the local, your community, your family, your household, your classrooms, your workplace, the people that you go to church with, or your other faith-based houses of worship. It's those people that really, when it comes down to it, that are going to have the greatest amount of, you know, detriment or value in terms of relational wealth and social capital. And so your ability to change your own world and your own sector of society is a lot more in our grasp than I think it feels like it is when we think about this broader national landscape and only think about the politically ideological partisanship. Division is everywhere, but division isn't bad. It's toxic division that is bad. So our ability to look closer to ourselves, again, community, family, friends, and find opportunities to appreciate the differences of perspectives that people are showing up with, and also the commonality of values that get us to show up in the places and spaces that we are. I think building that muscle of relationship building, of empathetic listening, of being able to dialogue in a way that allows others to feel heard, that is almost like fuel. We are recharging our civic muscle, our social muscle to be able to recalibrate up to the point where, nope, I can make a difference. I do have the capacity to make change in my community. I do have the capacity to, appreciate and be appreciated by people whom really I would think wouldn't give me the time of day. And that refueling can then level up and go back to the broader scope of, state level, regional, national work, if that's where your focus is. But yeah, I think it's really easy to lose sight of how close to home this is for every single one of us in the country. In some way, we're affected by this issue, and we need to pay attention to the ways in which we have the power to make a difference for ourselves.
Mm-hmm. And like you say, even at the smallest level, maybe it's your homeowners association or something, right? It can be
Yeah.
right close to home.
Oh, yeah. Those can be real divisive. Whew, I would not want to be on a HOA board. No, thank you.
Right. It's something I know we've talked a bit about offline before. But, and you talked about this idea of building, that listening and listening muscle. But, for a lot of people, it's like, why should I do that? Like they've just reached this point where, whether it's kind of fear or anger or just exhaustion, they're like, why should I do that? Why, okay, you tell me to build the muscle. Why should I even do that? Like that's almost like, I don't want to do push-ups. Why should I do these? Why should I build this muscle?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a really important question for people to ask themselves. We live in a place where certainty feels a lot more comfortable. Knowing something 100% makes it easier to navigate life. It takes fear away, it takes question away. You can just follow that one directional path and feel pretty consistent with it. But you are up against a lot of other people in your social circle whose certainty does not align necessarily with your certainty. And so you are constantly going to be bumping heads. There is no way to avoid that friction in our everyday life. So if you are somebody who is okay with that, recognizing that it's going to likely break relationships, that it's going to close off opportunities for you, that it may not provide the richness of experience, diversity of thought, and opportunities, then I guess don't listen. I mean, maybe it's not for everyone, but if you are looking for something better than what you have, if you are part of that, 87% of the population who is just exhausted with this toxic division in our country, if you would like to find opportunities to focus on the good and feel a greater sense of belonging, unity, hope, understanding, I would say do what we tell kids to do. Ask questions. Be curious. What are we told in kindergarten? There's no such thing as a bad question. Lean in with curiosity to try to get an understanding of where other people are coming from. In no way am I saying that you have to agree with them. And definitely not. If you come out of that conversation with the same level of conviction about your points of view on a particular topic, that is fine. But what you might also come away with is having a little bit more empathy for the why behind someone else's point of view, recognizing their lived experience, the information that they've been provided, the cultural norms of their life are different from yours. Doesn't mean you have to agree with what they've said, but you might have a greater level of appreciation for them. And then that visceral reaction of tension and anger and frustration about, well, why do they feel this way? How could they possibly think this? You're going to be able to turn down that heat on those emotions because it now is a little bit more clear for you as to how they came to that point of view. It also will help to humanize other individuals and allow you to appear more human to them. And in that, you're probably going to find that there are things that you do see eye to eye on. And there is opportunity for connection and relationship building. It doesn't have to be all about the things that you don't agree on. Try to remove some of that tension so that there is opportunity for relationship building. And I can pretty much guarantee you that you're going to be able to go through life with a less tense, stressed out, frustrated frame of mind because the world is going to seem a little bit more open because you've opened yourself.
And the world makes a little bit more sense too, because like you say, you can kind of see where people are coming from better.
Yeah. I mean, you're not blinded by your own false sense of certainty.
And on that point, on the certainty point, and that's a place where the media is definitely not helping us because they are always framing things in these very black and white ways, and they're usually very much exaggerating it. The headline will be politician X cancels program Y. Well, when you look into it, that's not true at all. It's like. Right. They maybe canceled this one piece of it or changed around something about it. But, people just run with that first thing. It becomes a meme. Everybody's saying it. And now you're mad at the other side because how could you possibly support canceling Project Y or whatever, right? So, this is our own, and I get it. They're playing on our psychology. But, I mean, the media is not doing us any favors on that. And then our own psychology doesn't help us because we fall into it so fast.
Right. Oh, yeah. Our brains really, really like shortcuts. So when we're handed a shortcut, we take it and we run with it. That's why, when you're in school, one of the skills that are most fundamental to learn is critical thinking. Be critical, be curious, ask questions. Don't just accept things for face value. And I think that's something that largely feeds into this issue of toxic polarization, that we forget that being critical doesn't mean that you are all of a sudden going rogue or that you have, abandoned your tribe. There's a lot of that. A lot of people who are afraid to ask questions out of fear of being, isolated or ostracized because what? Of course that thing is true. Our whole tribe feels that way. Asking a question should not be a reason that somebody is pushed out of a social circle.
Yeah, can be though. That's why we have to afraid of it.
Yeah.
So we at the beginning you were even mentioning in the job description they use this term bridge building and like what's that and so there still is a lot of kind of socializing of some of the language around this, but now that you're kind of on the ground working in this space, what's one of the most common misconceptions that you see now that you have sort of in compared to the reality of what you're experiencing on the ground and about this space? Because I even see people talk about how the term bridge building itself is like off-putting.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's two questions in that question. So let's go with the terminology first, and then I'll circle back to what are some of the biggest misperceptions, I guess, that I've seen. So yeah, I mean, the term bridge building, the way terminology gets in the way of a lot of stuff. In my opinion, it doesn't really matter what you call it. It is fundamentally about recognizing that there are differences in the way that we, two people or a group of people view things. And even though those differences are there, leaning in to strive to build trust, understanding, empathy, and opportunity for conversation between individuals so that we can work towards more collaborative common ground solutions in the future. Now, not all of bridge building includes that end element of the collaborative problem solving. It is a component, but even just the act of listening and then taking it to dialoguing is, a really big step for some people. And so, whether you call it bridge building, whether you call it, social capacity building, whether you call it community development work. I mean, this interesting thing, I think, in this space is that there are a lot more bridge builders out there than we realize or that people realize. The world is full of these stories of people bringing people together across difference to make their community and our country a better place. We just don't call it that. A huge example is the service sector, national service. Individuals are not showing up to a, food bank because they feel that everybody there thinks exactly the same way as them. They're also not not showing up because they're worried that the other people who are volunteering there are going to have a different faith background or political ideology. Those things usually don't come into our minds when we decide to engage in an act of civic stewardship, if you will. We do it because we care about our community and we believe that we have time and assets to give that could make our community a better place. We share that common goal. Well, guess what? We are building bridges and we don't even know it because by working with those other people, we are building relationships. We are engaging in opportunities to see each other as fully human. And we are likely crossing divides that we didn't even know were necessarily there. But after you've built those relationships, it's a lot harder to hate people if you do find out that they are drastically different than you. You have been able to see and understand and appreciate the full humanity that they bring to the table and as an asset to your community. Doesn't mean you have to agree with everything that they're about, but you've still built that framework. And so going back to the bridge building, the terminology is helpful for those of us who are in the field because we all, speak the same jargon, same thing with any field. But, if for those who are listening, if you are somebody who would be willing to help out your neighbor in a time of need, regardless of what, political sign they had in their yard during this last election cycle, then you definitely have a capacity for bridging. If you are somebody who is eager to invest back in your community and just wants better for everyone, regardless of their faith background, regardless of their identity, if you are looking to learn more and create a sense of belonging for people in the community, you have an aptitude for bridging. And so I think that, sometimes that language can trip us up. Then we could also get into the conversation of, how the word civic can sometimes throw people off because civic inherently, we're talking about, stewardship in the community. And at times it can be perceived to be more about, politics specifically or even political science. And it's not. But when politics come into things, people's hair stands up on the back of their neck and they get all like, not wanting to talk about it. So that's a whole nother piece. And for any of the listeners who find this component interesting, I would highly recommend that they check out PACE's more recent publication. And PACE stands for Philanthropy for Active Civic Engagement. They recently did a language study that helped us to understand how Americans perceive different terms within civic language, and even did a breakdown of how people of different backgrounds perceive those different terms. So how, people who tend to lean more conservative perceive words like democracy or belonging or bridge building or unity. And then the same thing for people on the left. And then Gen Z versus millennials versus so forth. And so if you're interested in understanding how terminology resonates with different groups and how you might be able to shift the ways that you say certain things so that you can be better heard and understood in the way that you intend, not in the way that may be misperceived, check out PACE's recent language study report. So that'll give everybody a really nice understanding of that. And then to your other question, if I may, about, what do I find to be one of the most shocking things in this space, kind of like doing the work. I am going to refer back to my own personal experience. And I think often about, that fear that I felt in applying for this job. And the fact that I, needed to consult my friends and ask for that check-in, because I knew I was coming into an organization where the leadership, the founder of Listen First Project was Pierce Godwin, a conservative. And I really questioned whether or not I was going to be able to do a good job and not rip my hair out working for somebody with a different political ideology than me. And the trepidation and all of the things that my brain told me to be mindful of and concerned about within 48 hours of spending time at one of our first in-person retreats, which just so happened to be like the week that I was hired. All of that fear and concern went out the window because I realized I was working with somebody who was going to be very quickly one of my best friends, made me laugh like crazy, was a total goofball, and also an incredibly intelligent, thoughtful, empathetic, understanding individual whom would never try to persuade or coerce or undermine the values that I held as an individual. And so all of this media rhetoric and perception that I had of, well, they're going to, probably have a lot of trepidation about me and not like me because of who I am and my background. And so I'll put up my self-defense of being kind of, defensive against what's coming at all of that blown out the window. And it has been that same experience over and over and over and over again across this field. When people allow themselves to be vulnerable and just show up as a human, the opportunity for that relationship building is so much stronger than the defensiveness that we otherwise would have put up to shield ourselves and protect our quote unquote, tribe. Throw the tribalism out the door. And that is where the heart of this work is. And I think it's shocking to me. It's not shocking to me that I was so fearful because I understand it. I remember it. And I know there's a lot of people who are in that space. It is shocking to me, though, how easy it was to be able to overcome that as soon as I made myself vulnerable and willing to try.
Mm-hmm. That might be more or less the answer to my next question. But I was going to ask if you could magically equip, every American with one tool or skill to improve their ability to engage in these difficult, dialogues. What would that be?
Hmm. That's a hard question because everyone's wired a little bit differently.
Yeah.
So, you know, I I'm gonna cheat and I'm gonna give you two answers.
Okay.
Um, I think for people who experience fear of losing their sense of self and or fear, you know, very understandable fear of having past wrongs or judgments or just acts that were unjust repeated by leaning into these types of relationships. For people who hold that, I would want to gift them with the power of uh, self-confidence to be resilient, to know that, if they enter into a conversation like this, if they do come up against something that just feels is going to break them, the resilience to know that it is a conversation and that they can withstand that type of conversation and carry on to continue along the journey because other situations may not be the same. I think sometimes we are fearful that we won't be able to handle something that's really hard. And so we choose to just avoid it altogether. That certainty, it's easier to just avoid and be certain about what we know. So I would say have that confidence that you are resilient and that you are equipped with what you need to be able to explore other relationships. Um, and then for people who are more adamant in their certainty, and are likely to be the ones where that asked earlier, why the heck should I do this? Why do you want me to listen? That doesn't make any sense to me, and they're all crazy. I would gift them with um, humility and curiosity. None of us know everything. None of us have the power to have all of the answers, and there is no such thing as certainty. So accept that hard pill to swallow, get a little bit more humble, and start asking questions that allow other people to share their experience. And then don't be afraid to share your own too, but don't start with that. Start with listening and humility.
Hmm. Yeah, that's great. So let's say someone has bought into, our listener has bought into our story that that improving, reducing this toxic polarization is a good thing, both for society, but also just for yourself personally, right?
Yeah.
So they bought into that. So what advice or actionable steps, would you offer, some listeners, and I'm sure listeners sometimes get tired of the same old ones, but let's see what you got.
Sure. Yeah. There are different things for everyone, right? So I would say, in terms of like a resource where you can go, I would suggest people go visit, it's called conversation.us. Instead of .com, it's .us. And on that platform, you will be offered a variety of evergreen resources that are available to you to start or further your bridge building journey. If you are somebody who is a reader, we have a selection of books that we recommend people dive into. If you want to watch a film, we have documentaries and fiction films that we recommend that help to show the value of and are themed around bridging divides. If you want to take action right now, there are opportunities to join in a conversation. You could join in a living room conversation and even start up a group in your community. You could participate in a One Small Step interview that's hosted by StoryCorps. You would be able to take the Unify challenge and engage in conversations with people that you're matched with across differences. If you want to get involved in your local community, there are likely people in your area who are also doing this work. You can check out some of the resources on conversation.us, but you can also reach out to me at Listen First Project, and I can help connect you into a place-based, action-oriented group that you will be able to thrive together with in this pursuit of greater belonging and unity in the community. There is just a plethora of resources. I mean, certainly I would suggest that they continue listening to your podcast, David, because they will hear more reasons and more speakers coming at it from slightly different perspectives around why, this outrage overload is just too much right now, and we need to turn down the heat. So those are all different mechanisms, and I'll offer, if you're a part of an organization, whether it be a large organization or you and a friend kind of running your own thing, and you feel that your calling and your work really aligns with what we've been talking about here, about this bridge building, reach out to me. Join the Listen First Coalition. You'll be invited to be in part in community with over 500 other organizations across the country who share this deep conviction that we are stronger together as Americans, and we have a duty to help our other Americans see that there is space for relationship building, trust and empathy building, that we don't need to succumb to this us versus them rhetoric that we're fed.
I think that's the best answer I've ever had to that question. That was a lot of resources, and we will make sure we have links to all that in the show notes, so you don't have to necessarily remember it. But conversation.us, right, is a great place to start. But we will have links, and I'll ask you to provide me all that to make sure we're able to get pointers to all that stuff, because those were some great resources. Karissa, it's really been great speaking with you. Thank you so much for making time for our show.
Thank you so much, David. It was a pleasure, and I am grateful to have you as a member of our coalition as well.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to getting more involved.
Wonderful.
That is it for this episode of the Outrage Overload podcast. For links to everything we talked about on this episode, go to outrageoverload.net. Want to dive deeper? Check out my Substack at outrageoverload.substack.com or outrageoverload.net/newsletter for more insights beyond the podcast. Subscribe, comment, and join the conversation. If you found this episode valuable, please share it or leave a review. It really helps. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next time.